Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Vanessa Ament, and today I'm speaking with Rachel Chancey, who is a Foley professional. Now, I say professional because she is a Foley artist, but she's also a Foley editor and a Foley supervisor. Now, Rachel studied theater at NYU and lives in New York, where she has her own custom Foley stage in her home, which is going to be one of the more interesting things we talk about today, among a lot of other things. So I'm really excited because, Rachel, I remember that I got to meet you when we worked together on a student film, a student produced film that became a short that I worked on when I was the endowed chair at Ball State University, called Amplified, a conversation with women in professional, American women in professional film sound. And I was disappointed because we didn't get to talk as much then as I had hoped. I got to talk with some marvelous New York women sound professionals. That was actually one of the highlights for me.
Yeah.
What amazing women. Weren't they just the best?
They were terrific.
Wasn't that a great day? But you didn't get to speak as much as I liked. And so I thought, in the back of my mind, I thought, okay, one of these days I need to talk with Rachel again. And so when I got the idea to do this podcast and YouTube channel, Holy Foley, and then just a plug, the name of my musical about Foley is called Holy, but H-O-L-Y, Holy Foley, that I'm workshopping right now, because I love wordplay. I thought Rachel's got to be an early person on this because I've been wanting to talk to you because I remember what an introspective and insightful person you were to speak with. So thank you for agreeing to do this.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is exciting for me. I want to start right away with our commonality of being two women with degrees in theater. We did theater, and then ended up doing Foley. Both have been Foley supervisors, both have been Foley editors. Who'da thunk it, as they say in the movie The Group. Who'da thunk it? I think we might be the only two. It's a weird thing. You're East Coast, I'm West Coast, but it's a strange thing. And I remember that we talked about this before. So I want to hear, before we get going into the more philosophical stuff, which is what I like to talk about, I want to hear how you ended up in sound from theater. So if you can just briefly give me that journey, I'd really appreciate it.
Well, there is a sort of a pre-story, which is the whole theater in high school and theater in college. And I can give you that now or later, but the theater to film was really a matter of necessity. I had graduated from NYU in theater. I had struggled for about 3 years, for about a year on 3 different projects, trying to make ends meet, trying to figure out how to get a project, into the hands of, or get eyes on a project. And I decided the best way to do that was to film it. And I spoke to all of my film graduate friends and I said, should I go back to film school? And they said, no. They said, get an internship somewhere. So after the BFA in theater, I got an internship at a place called Action Productions, Spin Cycle Post. And I did anything and everything an intern could possibly do there. I became an apprentice. I then became an assistant editor. I joined the union. I was working on both the picture side of things and the sound side of things. And Spin Cycle was one of those great places that had a little bit of everything. They had picture rooms, they had sound rooms, they had an ADR/Foley stage. And at the time, there was a great group of editors there who were willing to teach you and keep you as an assistant. And I don't know that you find that nowadays as much.
No, I would say you don't.
Yeah. So I was very fortunate. We were one of the first nonlinear editing machines in New York. So we were kind of problem solving and figuring out how to get material from the Avids into, then it was the Audio Vision, and then it became Pro Tools, and the history is all there.
I want to back up a little bit. When you were at NYU, you're talking about getting projects going. So were you an actor or a writer, or were you interested in directing? What was your focus? Because that's going to kind of help me figure out where I want to go with this discussion philosophically with you.
Sure. I mean, I have been surrounded by performers since I was in ninth grade. Growing up in New Orleans. I made a decision early on, actually in eighth grade, to leave parochial school. I left my Catholic school and went to a public school. And that opened up the creative arts to me. And I can talk a little more about growing up there and how it influenced me. But I'm sorry, what was the original question there?
Oh, I mean, so was your focus writing in at NYU, or was it acting, or was it directing? What was the particular interest for you?
Yeah, I was interested in all of it. I had been involved in all of it in high school. I was interested in a well-rounded theater education, and I went to Playwrights Horizons Theater School, which does do that. They teach you stage management. They teach you costume design. They teach you voice and movement and scene study, and they teach you dramaturgy. They teach you directing. You cannot focus on one thing there. And by the end of my 3 years there, I really wanted to direct and dramaturg. And that's what I tried to do for about a year. I loved working with actors. I loved researching plays. I loved researching the time periods that plays were written in and what was going on politically and socially. If I could spend my time in a rehearsal mode or in research mode, that's what made me happy,
Don't you find that rehearsal is actually in some ways more fascinating than getting to the performance?
It's the most fascinating part for me, working in high school with professional actors, because I worked backstage, was watching the director give notes at the end of the performance, or I'm sorry, not at the end of the performance, at the end of the rehearsal or the run through, and kind of watching that connection between the director and the actor. And the actor may not even know they did something, and the director picked up on it and said, I love that, do that again, and then you've got a connection there. And watching that was really the most fascinating thing.
It's funny, so many people who are interested in what it is we do, whether it be in theater or film and Foley, all they want to do is hear, oh, well, what did you use on, or how did you do that? Or and I get really tired of those questions. I just blah blah blah. I don't care. What always fascinates me is process. So what I get really intrigued with is watching someone's approach and what their process is. I get so wrapped up in process. And so the process becomes so intriguing to me. And then once you get to the result, it's like, oh, the process is over. And and so for me, when I'm doing performance, because I've been a performer since I was a kid, and then when I was 17 and I went on the road doing a show with Shirley Jones and Ron Huesman, the performance was great, and I love performing, but the process and learning how people approached their work always intrigued me. And so now in Foley, when I hear interviews of people being interviewed, it's always the same kind of shallow approach to it. Right. And I'm much more interested in, and I talked to you a little bit about this when we pre-interviewed, before we did the film work, the film thing, was, and this is why it was interesting talking to the New York women. They really got into the bones of the work. The process is what intrigues me, how people approach it. And I was doing a little reading on you, and the little bit of ink that you get. You don't get enough. You don't get enough. You don't get enough. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you. One of the things you said was you really like to think about the character and the approach of the actor and what goes on inside of the performance of the actor when you do Foley. And that's something that I do, but I think it's because we come from theater and we think about that. So when you are working on a Foley performance, How is it that you look at the character and you decide whether you're doing a prop work? Because I know if you look at it like I do, you know that every character, every actor who embodies the character is going to handle the prop a little differently. They're not just picking up a glass. The character's picking up the glass. So it's a little different with each actor being the character. How do you approach the embodiment of the character doing the prop work or the footsteps?
Um, I mean, the very first thing I do is I watch the project, and I'm surprised at how many people don't. Actually, they kind of roll right into it. I watch it, and I try not to think about the Foley. I try to think about the emotion of the characters. I try to think about the journey. I try to think about the balance. Um, uh, and I try to think about what's grounding the character to the scene, to the place. Whether that be literally their feet on the floor and what they're wearing, um, or how they handle props, and the decisions that they make as actors, um, in their physical world, you know, whether those are conscious decisions or subconscious decisions. They've made decisions to touch this, to fool with this, to play with this, to throw this away, to grab this, to, you know, maybe it's a tick, maybe it's a particular prop that has some significance, to story, to emotion, to the past, to the future. And I think like an actor would. And
Mhm,
I try to honor the decisions the actor has made.
mhm.
When they're making those decisions, I want to make sure that I've got something to give. You know, there are some actors who don't handle props very well, and then you're trying to make up for it. But there are more cases of actors who have thought about how to anchor emotionally the character into the scene using you know the few things they have around them and
I
what they're
explore that a
focusing
little
on.
bit, if you don't mind,
Hmm.
because I'm similar to you this way. So, since we're both trained as actors,
Hmm.
here's what I think is interesting. You can kind of, when you've been trained as an actor, you can tell when you can tell a bit about the technique that they've been trained in. You can tell whether they come from theater or whether they went strictly to film.
Hmm.
You can tell whether they're method or whether they're British style, outside in, inside out. And you can read a lot about how they're going to approach the work. And I find that part fascinating
Yeah.
because I think actors are heroes. They are bringing in the humanity of a character. And I have a
Hmm.
phenomenal respect um,
Hmm.
for actors, especially those that are particularly gifted and show a lot of vulnerability and are really willing to put themselves into something and let us see the vulnerability of who they are and what they bring to the character. So when they are bringing that to the way they walk or the way that they enter a scene or the way that they handle the prop, or whether or not they are the more chaotic kind of unpredictable actor, or whether they are an extremely pristine, disciplined actor. And we can tell if we've
Yeah.
been trained, we can tell what kind they are often. I love the surprise of discovering that about them and honoring their choices. And I like to use one example. Um, Over and over again when I discuss this, when I worked on the film Malice and I watched Alec Baldwin, who
Hmm.
is a very precise, specific actor, very trained, very specific. He plays this very narcissistic doctor who has a God complex. And when he moves into this home in Boston, and it's with, I won't give the plot away, but he goes running and he comes in and he has a God complex and he thinks he's all that in a bag of chips. He comes in running and he opens the refrigerator and he jingles it, grabs, I think it's orange juice, and drinks it from the bottle. Now, the whole thing is very grandiose.
Hmm.
So the jingling of the refrigerator, which is an old style refrigerator, has more jingle than it would if it was a more thoughtful, empathic person. And the way
Hmm.
he grabs it is more grandiose and full of himself. So when I was working the props, I made sure to honor his choice.
Hmm.
Now, I'm wondering if a Foley artist had not been trained in acting would have noticed that. I don't know, but I know I did because I thought, I see what Alec's doing here. I wanted to make sure to support that with the way I did it sonically, because I thought fascinating choice. Fascinating choice, because I really respect what he does as an actor. I can see he's making a conscious decision to run in and be full of himself and just talking, and he's just grabbing the door and he's grabbing it, shaking the, and I'm supporting that. I'm giving it, I'm doing it in Foley, and I'm, and it's like, he's all there.
Yeah.
And it makes it really fun when you understand actors' motivation and you understand their intention. Then another experience I had was when I moved back to LA, right before the pandemic. My endowed chair ended, and I moved back to LA. I said, "Get me back to LA, please. Get me back home." And it was right before the pandemic, but it was before the pandemic, and I was in the Editors Guild, and I took a workshop on picture editing, and we were working on a scene that Michael Keaton did, and we showed a bunch of different takes, and we were picking takes and matching scenes and matching edits, and I noticed that he was very inconsistent. And that does not surprise me, because I think he's one of those actors who brings to it whatever he's feeling in the moment. But he's genius and fresh and brings a bit of chaos, but freshness. He is one of my favorites, but he's not exactly precisely the same. Now, the actor he was doing the scene with was exactly the same at every single take. So it was fascinating with the cut, shot, and over the angle and reverse shot, how the person he was working with was exactly the same, and he was chaotically different every single time, and we had to figure out, we worked in teams, how to manage this picture edit. And I thought, wow, what a challenge for picture and sound, whoever's working on a Michael Keaton. Now, I did Batman Returns, and we did sound on that, and I walked and did props for Keaton in it, but it had already been massaged by picture, so I did not know this about him when I worked on that, and I loved working on that film because I love working with Tim Burton. But watching these takes, watching these fresh, raw takes and having to work on it this way, I went, whoa, did I just learn something? And it was fascinating doing the picture edit part of it to see that it was not consistent. And yet he brought really fascinating revelation to his interpretation each time. And I thought, fascinating that this is his approach. I've learned something about him that I did not know before. And I learned so much about the way he approached his work. And it didn't really surprise me, but I learned a lot about him. And I think he's absolutely brilliantly gifted, and I love his work. And I thought, it doesn't surprise me that he's like this. What a challenge for picture. By the time it gets to sound, we already have the chosen takes, and the chosen takes are amazing, and they match, and we don't have a lot of challenge because they've already given us our selections. So that's something that a lot of people who don't know much about sound and post would never know, that we have to, as you say, sometimes the actors aren't matching and we have to cover for them, and we do. It's like, oh, the glass was up, the glass was down, we have to cover for that. Ooh, but we want to honor their genius, whatever it may be, and we want to make them look, we want to honor them, because we have a background in theater, and we know that actors are heroes, and we want to honor their choices.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, and you're also helping the picture editor, by if they don't quite have the edit continuity correct, you're finessing that.
Right.
So yeah, it's a problem solving task, and I love it.
Yeah. It's problem solving, and it's process, and it's and honoring the writer, the director, whoever's doing the sound supervising, or sometimes they like to say sound design, but it's also the supervisor making the pragmatic choices, and the actor, and everything that came before us, and everything that will happen afterwards in the dub. And realizing that it isn't all about us, that we are in this team that's all happening at the same time, but we're not in the same room. Whereas in theater, we're all there together at the same time.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what it feels like for the task for you when you are supervising the whole thing, how you approach your work a little differently than when you're just in the trenches being the Foley artist.
Are we talking when I used to supervise other people or when I'm sort of supervising myself?
When you would supervise other people, because I
Yeah.
can assume that when you're supervising yourself, it's integrated, but when you would have to
Yeah.
supervise other people, they're not going to
Mhm.
approach the work the way you do. Now, I know what it's like for me,
True.
but I'm curious what it's like for you.
Well, I think you have to fight for what you want. There's always going to be financial budget constraints and calendar problems, and I always feel like I am fighting the clock. Really, I want to get my 8 hours of recording in, and I need to record this much stuff. I try to come in as prepared as possible. um, I give probably too much more information than Foley artists and engineers want. I will watch the film down. I will know what everyone is wearing, what it's made of, what this weapon is, but I also will emphasize for them, he's feeling lonely in this scene, or she's feeling stressed in this scene, or I try to, even when I used to cue for other people, I, I instead of using the word hug, I would use embrace, because I felt that an embrace might get me a warmer Foley. you know. I would try to fight for those special moments. I think 75% of Foley is just, cover this, cover that, cover, and then you've got 25% that's like, okay, this is special. Let's spend some time on it. And I want the emotion in the Foley. I want the human element. And that used to mean one thing, and now I think with AI, it's becoming the human element is being redefined in a way.
I'm
Um,
curious about that because I have my own feelings about AI probably being the devil, and
yeah,
I'm not a tech fan. The more technology we get, the more I get very resistant because I think that
yeah,
we're losing. I think this is a very bad thing.
I
Um,
agree.
I think this absolute addiction to thinking technology is good. And
Uh-huh.
I just think, have we lost our ability to think critically? Because it's not. Um,
Hmm.
there's a reason that Foley was Foley. It's because it was the human
Hmm.
element. It's the acting part of sound. How
Hmm.
do Foley artists respond to if they're not schooled or if they're not experienced with, a lot of most Foley artists don't come from theater. Most Foley artists don't come
Yeah.
from acting. They come from a lot of different backgrounds.
Hmm.
And
Many of those backgrounds are technical too.
right, which
They're
means
not.
it's going to be very alien to them when you're talking about emotion.
Yeah.
I know in LA, which is far more experienced with actors than in New York, but even then, they look at me when I have 7 heads when I start talking this way. I
Hmm.
don't over prepare with them. I actually, knowing all these Foley artists as well as I do, when I would supervise, I would give them as much freedom as possible and
Hmm.
um, talk with them more like the Foley artist and give them a lot of freedom, and then go back and listen and then maybe tweak a little bit. But I would have a very different approach than that because um, I knew that they would not understand a lot of what I would say otherwise. So I would just give an awful lot of freedom and let
Hmm.
people approach it the way that they would want to. But I'm curious how they would respond to I have 2 questions here. How they would respond to you wanting to get a theatrical kind of emotion in there when that might not be their bag. And 2, how is AI affecting the craft now? Those are 2 different questions, but I'm curious what
Hmm.
you're finding.
I find that most Foley artists respond well to, uh, you know, discussions about the emotional life of the characters. I think it's probably at least early in one's career, an important part of it. I think
Yeah.
people do tend to get burnt out. And if schedules are hard and you've been doing it and you're tired, and sometimes you just want to get through it and just do what is good enough, you know. But I think if there's someone acting as a cheerleader for that, or guiding them, in that direction. Most of us are pretty flexible. And if what you want me to do is just slam out some Foley, I can do that. But I would rather, spend time with it and talk about the story and the characters. And I think in most cases, if you come in with that angle, you get a good response. As far as,
I'm sorry.
I was going to go into AI, but we can.
Yeah. That was my next question. And what about the AI part?
I am afraid of AI. I think AI should be used for things that humans shouldn't be used for, like detonating bombs or, or dealing with, dangerous situations. I don't think AI should be any part of the creative arts. Use it for things that humans are no good at. But we're pretty good at theater. We're pretty good at film, at music, and I just don't want to see the creativity replaced with, I don't even know what I'm calling it. Is it a robot? Is it a software? That doesn't make any sense to me.
It's unfortunate, but as soon as you put profit motive into something, you're going to get, we're at a very sad state, because unfortunately we have people who value profit so much that if they see a way to replace human labor, they're going to, and they don't care.
Mm-hmm.
We've gone so far in that direction now where the humanity of something doesn't matter anymore. And I've been railing against this for so long, I'm just tired of even talking about it anymore. It's like, why don't you get it? Why don't you get it? Don't replace people with technology. Use technology for things that people don't need to be doing. Don't replace people with technology. What do you not get? But the greed factor is an addiction.
Yeah.
It's just that simple. Greed is an addiction.
Yeah.
And I can't help you with that. I remember when I saw Blade Runner, I tell a lot of people in my own personal world this story. I saw Blade Runner and I walked out of the theater and I went, we're in trouble. Replicants, we're in trouble. The idea that anybody would think that's a good idea is insane. And as soon as you start wanting to replace human beings for any reason whatsoever, you have lost your own sense of humanity, because what a stupid idea. And we just don't learn. So it's going to be very interesting. And being somewhat of a truth teller myself, I just wonder why nobody ever stops to think about the consequences of actions. But it just seems to be a human frailty of not thinking about the consequences of action. So here we are, I'm curious about, you had a studio, you were in Brooklyn and you decided to put a studio in your home. So that's the first part. And then we'll get to the second part about your move. What prompted you to build a studio in your home in Brooklyn in the first place?
I had a home out, it was a weekend place out in the, East Hampton, Long Island. And I had started recording just small things there, low budget, non-union projects. And I figured, let me just give this a shot. I put up some denim insulation around, and I kind of did a little recording, and it turned out pretty well. And I enjoyed performing. It was the first time I performed Foley after having supervised and edited for so long. And I decided I needed a bigger space, and I wanted to be in the city, not going back and forth between my cramped Chelsea apartment and the house out in East Hampton. So I bought a place in Brooklyn, and I set up a studio in the basement. And I thought, I'll just take my time, and I'll outfit it the way I want and build it out. And then we heard news that Sound One had closed.
Yeah.
And it was literally people went into work and there were padlocks on the doors in the middle of projects. I mean, some projects had just started, and everyone scrambled. I mean, everyone was in shock, but everyone just scrambled to do whatever they could to get the work done, to find a new home. And I remember speaking to Jay Rubin on the phone. We had a feature film in there. We had not started recording yet. It was spotted. It was ready to go. And I said, give me 2 days and I can record this thing in my basement. He said, okay. And I spent all weekend building sound panels. Like I was up
Wow.
like into the night, with insulation
You were
and
doing this
getting,
yourself? You were doing this
yeah,
yourself?
yeah, yeah.
Fascinating.
So
Wow.
because it was a live, it was a stone basement, so it was a very live space. So I needed
Oh,
to
here's the
deaden
sidebar. What a woman. Whoa.
it.
She can do anything.
Yeah, I had my power tools out. I was determined. So I that was the first job I did in that basement space in Bed-Stuy. Jay Peck, who was the Foley artist at Sound One at the time, um, he had plans in motion to go upstate and start recording there, but he wasn't ready yet. So he did a couple of jobs down in my basement and then moved his studio. And that's how it started. It was sort of like necessity is mother is what is the phrase?
Mother is the necessity is the mother of
Is the
invention.
mother of invention. That's what it was. And just a lot of sort of I can do it, I can do it, I can do it, I know I can. Um, and from there on, I think I might have done 2 or 3 other jobs after that outside of my own studio. But from there on, it was me just working
So did
alone.
you mix your own?
I record and perform and edit and spot. I
How do
send everything.
how do you do that? I mean, is it da 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 push da 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 do the glass down? Okay, da 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 okay, stop.
That's exactly it.
Okay, so you're
I
a little bit insane.
Yeah, a little bit insane.
Okay, got it.
I'm like one of you ever see the one-man band with the harmonica and the
I
drums?
almost want
That's
to come
my
in
deal.
and do a little video of it and say, okay, she really is a little bit wacko. So here we are.
Yeah, I hit record, I run into place, I perform the Foley, I run back to the keyboard, I hit stop. And if I'm doing props, I edit it right then and there.
Right.
And then I move on to my next cue. If I'm doing footsteps, I will give them a listen. If I'm happy, I'll do another take. I'll move on to the next cue. But yeah, I do it right there. Make sure I've got what I need. Make sure I've got all the elements I need. Record edit the prop, and then move on.
This is not typical for America. There are a lot of Europeans that will do this, and some people in Pakistan, and there are countries where this is not unusual. But in the United States, this is a very unusual process for somebody to do.
Yeah.
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 So you must work very quickly then.
I do. I work quickly. I have long days.
So this is an inspiration for somebody who wants to be able to, if they think that, I mean, me, I would not want to do it. I am someone who is, no, this is not my style. I am a mindful person who likes to do one thing at a time. So for me, I am very much a mindful person. I just got through doing at the Palm Springs Art Museum, theater Foley. I'm an equity actor. So as an equity actor in this theater play that most of us were equity, we did this at the Palm Springs Theater, at the theater in the Palm Springs Museum, the Annenberg Theater. We did a play, and I was the actor who was the Foley artist. And I've done this before with Luke Yankee, a director. He's Eileen Heckert's son, and he does theater. And I've done several of these with him. And we did it this weekend, and I was very intensely focused on doing all of the sounds. And I've done this a lot. I've done many of these over the years. And I also did voices. I did some of the characters, and I did some singing in it. And I like being very focused on doing my tasks, and I was extremely busy doing all of that. But I don't like doing tech much. I would not want to be the one that, and I've done editing. I was an editor, but I would not want to mix and edit, and I would not want to do all of that. I would want to be focused on the one thing I do. So when I was doing Foley, if I had to edit the Foley I did it. I'd have the tracks sent to me, and I would edit them. either on Mag or then when I went to Pro Tools on Pro Tools.
Mhm.
I would not want to be doing all of those different processes at one time because I really like staying focused on the one mindful thing I'm doing.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
I
that's
I
the
I
reason.
hear you. I understand where you're coming from. I do. It is sometimes a relief to go supervise on a stage where there's two other people there doing their jobs, and you're just kind of, making sure that the ship stays the course. But I have to say, the one thing I've gained from doing it all myself is if I want to spend a few extra minutes on something, if I'm wondering, did I get it? Can I listen to that again? Can I, I am my own taskmaster. I am my own schedule keeper. I can spend as much or as little time on something. I'm not wasting anyone else's time. I don't have to negotiate with two other people or three other people about, can we listen to that again and see, it's all me. So I am, I'm taking as much or as little time as I want. Um, and
How do
I mean,
you
I love,
I'm sorry.
oh,
How do you send your tracks to your client?
I send everything, over the internet. I send them all separated. One thing I love getting is I have been getting on my recent projects dialogue bounces of the dialogue edit
Good.
and effects bounces of the effects edit. And listening, I feel like I'm not, I can't collaborate in the room with people, but when I get those tracks and I put them against the Foley and I listen to it all together, oh, it's fantastic. And then I might get an idea. Oh, the effects. Oh, he did this. So let me add that, and then it becomes this layering thing. And, it's just
Okay,
so much
so
fun.
you are feeling like a real filmmaker. What people might be fascinated to know is you've moved out to Long Island and
I
now you
did.
have two stages. So why do you have two, my darling?
Well, there's Brooklyn, but I'm not recording there right now. I'm mostly recording, well, almost all in Oceanside now.
So you have
And
one in Brooklyn and run here.
I'm all out in, I'm out in Long Island.
So you have two out here in Long Island.
Well, I have one space in two rooms. And the rooms are wired as one room, but I have a separation between clean Foley and dirty Foley.
Is that
One is, well, I've been working on projects lately that have created dust and dirt. And so I have my exteriors in one room.
that's what you mean by clean and dirty. You mean exterior
Yes,
and interior.
I mean literally clean
Because
and dirty.
that is very much the European style. You know that. That a
So I'm
lot the French
keeping,
do it that way. They have different rooms.
yeah.
And Heike did that in Finland, and
Mhm.
Andy has in Canada does a lot of different rooms. He
Yep.
does it in his own house, his farmhouse.
Yeah. The acoustics are a little different. Yeah. It's
Well,
fantastic.
so you are really kind of, so what our listeners really need to understand is Rachel Chancey has sort of reinvented. Well, also, Hi-Fi Foley in downtown LA has their house sort of wired this way too. So
Uh-huh.
this is interesting to me because I come from such of a traditional classic way of doing things in
Mhm.
LA. And a lot of people do some Foley recording outside exteriors. The Italian style does that. Um, Miklos in Misha in Serbia does a lot of stuff outside. What I think is very fascinating, this is why I like to talk theory and philosophically about Foley and performative film sound. This idea that there's only one way to do it, the Hollywood ethnocentric or Hollywood centric way of doing things. I like to break open this bottle and break it and say, we really need to stop thinking there's one way of doing Foley. I was trained the classic way, and
Mhm.
that's the way that I know how to do it. But because I started writing the Foley Grail, and the first edition came out in 2009, and the second one was 2014, and the third one was 2021, it's every time I revise it, I keep trying to break open and get into more international, more different ways of looking at it, because it's very important, Rachel, for people to understand who are interested in Foley performative film sound, that there are so many different approaches, and we need to be open to
Mhm.
people philosophically and theoretically and methodologically different ways of doing things so that we don't get stuck thinking there's one way. And I'm fascinated when people start breaking open this idea and using their human intelligence and creativity and inventiveness to find innovative ways of doing things out of necessity or out of boredom. We have to get rid of assumptions. So this is really fascinating to me, what you're doing, that you've got a room that's dirty that you can do exteriors and a room that's clean where you can do pristine interior sound. Oh, I wanted to talk about Queen's Gambit briefly. You got an Emmy and a Golden Reel for one of the episodes for Queen's Gambit. I wrote a song based on, I'm in the Society of Composers and Lyricists, and Sally Stevens, who's a because I'm a songwriter. Sally Stevens, who's a vocal contractor, and we were matched up in a workshop, and we wrote a song together called "Find Me," based on Queen's Gambit. And because we both selected individually to work on that song, and then we were matched. So we have that in common. I'm so proud of you. That was a wonderful series, and I wanted to write a song just based on that. And we wrote this wonderful song. It's on my website that I put it up there, the song we wrote. So Rachel got the Emmy and the Golden Reel for her work, in addition to the sound design for that and her Foley on that. So I want everyone to know how wonderful you are that you got that. Just
Thank you so much.
Yeah, because it's a brilliant show. So Rachel,
it's so much fun.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here.
There's so much more to talk about.
There always is.
Yeah. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Vanessa.
We will talk more later. Okay.
Sounds wonderful. Okay. Yes.
Take care.
Enjoy. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.